Excuse me, can I help you?
I'm Nia Brooks. I'm the featured performer for tonight.
I'm sorry?
I was invited. My contract is on file.
Do you have someone with you?
A handler?
Someone to assist you. This is a high-level event, very specific expectations. It's not about your ability, it's about the donors inside expect a certain standard.
What standard?
This isn't a small stage. These are major benefactors.
They've supported this gala for years.
So have I. I think there's been a misunderstanding about what tonight requires.
No. I think there's been a misunderstanding about who you think is standing in front of you.
This is the performer?
Yes, sir.
How does that work exactly?
I play the violin.
No, I mean, you're blind.
Yes.
So how are we supposed to trust this performance is going to meet expectations tonight?
You're about to find out.
Victoria Langford was 51 years old, white, silver-haired, and dressed in a way that communicated authority without trying to. She carried a tablet and wore a headset and had spent 23 years managing high-profile charity events for some of the wealthiest people in the country. She was not, by her own assessment, a prejudiced woman. She would have told you this herself if you had asked. She would have told you that she judged people by their work, not their appearance. She would have believed it. But she was standing here not moving, not opening the door, just looking. "Do you have something with you?" Victoria asked. "An invitation or a contract? Something from the organizing committee?" Nia reached into her small crossbody bag without a word and produced a folded letter. She held it out. Victoria took it and read it. Her expression did something complicated. Then she folded it and handed it back. "I see," she said. And then, after a pause that had no good reason to exist, "I just want to make sure we're on the same page about what tonight is. This isn't a small event. We're expecting people at a very high level, major donors, public figures, people who've been coming to this event for years. The expectation for the performance is, you understand, significant." "I understand," Nia said. "It's just—" Victoria stopped, started again. "Do you have someone with you? A handler or—" "A handler," Nia repeated. The word sat between them. "Someone to assist you," Victoria said, and her voice had gone careful in the way that careful voices go when they're trying to walk back something they've already said. "I don't need a handler," Nia said. "I need someone to show me to the dressing room. That's standard in my rider, which is attached to the contract, which you just read." The door opened from the inside. A woman pushed through. Early 60s, precise, unhurried. This was Margaret Chen, the Foundation's executive director, who had come to check on the performer's arrival, and who, from the look on her face as she took in the scene, understood immediately what had been happening in the 30 seconds before she got there. "Ms. Brooks," Margaret said warmly, "I'm so glad you're here. I'm Margaret Chen. Please come in." She held the door open. She looked at Victoria. Victoria looked back. Neither of them said anything. Nia walked inside. But the evening was only beginning. To understand what was at stake in that doorway, you need to know who Nia Brooks was and what it had taken her to get there. She was born in Akron, Ohio, the second child of a woman named Diane Brooks, who worked the morning shift at a hospital cafeteria and the evening shift cleaning offices on the days she could get the extra hours. Nia's father had been gone since she was 3. Her brother Marcus, 8 years older, had learned early how to be the third adult in a 2-person household, packing lunches, helping with homework, keeping the lights on in ways that didn't make it onto any bill. Nia could see until she was 7. The illness that took her sight came fast and without warning, an inflammatory condition that attacked her optic nerves over 6 weeks during the winter of 2nd grade. 3 doctors, 2 hospitals, 1 correct diagnosis that arrived 2 weeks too late to make a difference. By spring of that year, the world Nia had known, the yellow kitchen curtains, her mother's face, the orange streetlight through her bedroom window at night, had become a country she could no longer enter. She had only the memory of it, and the memory of a 7-year-old is imperfect and gorgeous and irreplaceable. The grief was real. It took years. The violin came when she was 9. Her school had a music program. Barely funded, 1 teacher, not enough instruments. And that teacher was a man named Mr. Dawes, who had studied music seriously before life redirected him to a public school in Akron, and who had decided that this redirection was not a lesser fate. He placed a violin in Nia's hands on the first day. She didn't play it. She just held it, turned it over, felt the shape of it with both hands, the curve of the body, the narrowing waist, the cool tension of the strings against her fingertips. "What does it feel like?" Mr. Dawes asked. She thought about it. "Like something that's waiting," she said. He taught her for 3 years. By the end of the first year, she was the best student he had. By the end of the third, she was playing at a level that exceeded anything he could teach her, and he told her so honestly, and then he spent the next several months finding her the next teacher. The years that followed were built from sacrifice in the specific way that working-class families build things, piece by piece with nothing to spare. Diane Brooks picked up extra shifts for lesson money. She went into debt for a summer program that offered a partial scholarship but not a full one. She drove Nia to competitions in a car that had no heat on the passenger side, and she reached over at red lights to put her hand on Nia's knee without saying anything, because she had learned that sometimes warmth is the only correct response. Nia won some of those competitions. She lost others. She applied to 5 conservatories at 17 and was accepted to one, a small school in Columbus that offered a partial scholarship. Diane covered the rest in a way she never fully explained and Nia never fully asked about, because they both understood that the conversation would be too much for both of them to hold. She graduated at 21. She spent the next 3 years building a career one performance at a time. Churches, community concerts, regional festivals, occasional corporate events that paid enough to cover the next month's rent. She was 24 years old, and she had been playing seriously for 15 years, and she had never in her life been handed anything that she hadn't also earned. The invitation to perform at the Aldrin Foundation Gala had come through an anonymous national competition. She hadn't known when she submitted her audition recording what the event was. She had known only that it was a professional opportunity and that she played the piece as honestly as she knew how. She had ranked first. She did not know this yet on the night she walked through the door of the Caldwell Arts Center. She knew only that she had been invited, that she had a contract, that she had a letter, and that a woman with silver hair had looked at her white cane and decided in the span of a second that something here was wrong. She knew that look, had known it since she was 9, would probably know it for the rest of her life. She walked to the dressing room with Margaret
Hey,
Chen
I'm Raikon.
beside
Before
her,
we go any further,
and she breathed
if
and
you've
she
ever felt
prepared.
like you had to prove yourself twice as hard just to get half the hit that subscribe button, because trust me, it gets a lot more tense before it gets better.
The Caldwell Arts Center had been built in 1923 as an opera house, fell into disrepair in the 1970s, and was restored in the early 2000s at a cost that required the kind of money that comes with the kind of names that end up on buildings. Its main event hall seated 340 people in a space of dark wood paneling and high ceilings in the specific, almost cellular silence of a room that had been built to hold music. Tonight it held something else first: wealth. The Aldrin Foundation Gala was in its 32nd year. Its stated purpose was funding educational access programs, scholarships, early childhood literacy, after-school initiatives for students in under-resourced communities. Its actual purpose, in the transactional sense that runs beneath all charity, was to concentrate powerful people in a room and ask them for money while they were feeling generous. This worked to the tune of $10 to $14 million a year. The guest list tonight was not long. It was selective, which is the word wealthy people use when they mean exclusive, which is the word they use when they mean controlled. Every person in that room had either significant money, significant influence, or both. The most important among them, for the purposes of this story, was a man named Gerald Stanton. Gerald Stanton was 64, white, and the kind of rich that has moved past caring about the number. He had built a private equity firm over 30 years and sold it for a figure that was reported differently in different publications, none of which got it right because he had arranged it that way. He sat on 3 foundation boards and gave to 2 others, and understood, with the precision of someone who had spent decades in rooms like this one, exactly how much his presence was worth to the people who had invited him. He was not a subtle man. He was a man who had learned, over time, that he did not need to be subtle. Subtlety is something you develop when you can't afford to simply say what you mean. Gerald Stanton had not needed subtlety in a very long time. He had been speaking with Victoria Langford near the entrance to the main hall when the news traveled to him through the specific osmosis of event spaces that there was a situation with the featured performer. "What kind of situation?" he asked. Victoria had been in the middle of refreshing his drink order with the catering coordinator. She looked up. "The committee made a booking selection that I have some concerns about." "What kind of concerns?" She chose her words. "The performer they've brought in is not what any of us were expecting." Gerald Stanton looked at her over the rim of his glass. He was not a man who required things to be spelled out, which was sometimes admirable, and tonight was not. "Show me," he said. Nia had come out of the dressing room once, briefly, to speak with the sound technician about the microphone placement for her instrument. She was standing in the corridor near the entrance to the main hall, white cane in her left hand and violin case in her right, talking through the technical specifications, when she heard footsteps approaching from her left. 2 sets. One she recognized. Victoria Langford's heels had a specific weight and rhythm. The other was slower, heavier, and stopped a half-step closer than polite distance required. "This is the performer?" said a voice she didn't recognize. Victoria said, "This is Ms. Brooks, yes." A pause. "You're the featured performer for tonight," the man's voice said. It was not exactly a question. "I am," Nia said. "And you play violin." "I do." Another pause. Gerald Stanton was looking at the white cane, then at the violin case, then at her face, with the unhurried frankness of a man who has never been made to feel that his scrutiny was unwelcome. "How does that work?" he asked. Nia kept her voice level. "I play the violin, the same way anyone does. But you can't—" He stopped, restarted. "You're blind." "Yes." "So how do you follow the other musicians? The conductor? How do you know where the stage is?" "I'm a solo performer," Nia said. "There's no conductor. And I walked the stage layout this afternoon." "You walked it?" "Yes." He absorbed this. Then, "And the committee booked you for tonight specifically? They knew about—" A pause. "Your situation?" "My situation," Nia said, and her voice stayed flat, "is that I'm a professional violinist. And yes, they knew I was blind. It's listed in my artist profile." She could feel the texture of the conversation. She had been in enough of them to know exactly where this one was going. Gerald Stanton looked at Victoria. "Who made this call?" "The selection committee," Victoria said carefully, "through an audition process I wasn't involved in." "Margaret's committee?" "Yes." He made a sound that wasn't quite a word. "And no one thought to flag this before tonight?" "That was the concern I raised," Victoria said. Her voice had the tone of someone who has been waiting to be validated and has just received it. "The donors in there have been coming to this event for 30 years. They have expectations. The performance is the emotional center of the fundraising ask. If it doesn't land, it's going to land," Nia said. Both of them turned toward her. "I'm sorry," Victoria said. "The performance is going to land," Nia said again, without heat. "That's not something either of you needs to manage." Gerald Stanton tilted his head. He was not accustomed to being spoken to this way, and his face did something brief and complicated. Then he said, "With respect, Ms. Brooks, I don't think you understand what's at stake tonight. I have personally committed to a significant donation contingent on this event, delivering what it's delivered for the last decade. That's not a conversation about your talent. That's a conversation about context and expectations." "What expectations?" Nia asked. He didn't answer directly. "I think what Mr. Stanton is trying to say," Victoria stepped in, smooth and careful, "is that we want to make sure the evening goes as planned. We have a backup ensemble we can call in. It wouldn't be a negative reflection on you. It would just be—" "Replacing me," Nia said, "adjusting the program. With a backup ensemble," Nia said, "that you want to call in because of concerns about my performance. Because of the very specific needs of this particular audience," Victoria said. "And what's specific about this audience?" Nia said quietly. "That makes them unable to hear a violin played well?" The sound technician with his clipboard found something urgent to look at on the floor. Gerald Stanton set his glass down on a nearby console table. "I think," he said, "we should let the committee make this call. Victoria, find Margaret." He walked away. Victoria lingered 2 more seconds, looking at Nia with an expression that was trying to be apologetic in achieving something closer to pitying. Then she turned and left. Nia stood in the corridor alone. The anger was real. She did not pretend it wasn't, but it had a time and a place, and this was neither. She turned and walked back toward the dressing room. 14 steps. Door on the right. She went inside and sat down and held her violin in both hands and breathed. Margaret Chen found Victoria and Gerald Stanton in a service corridor near the catering prep area, a space that had been repurposed in the way that such spaces always are at these events, into a temporary command center for things that couldn't be discussed in front of guests. Margaret was not a loud woman. She was the kind of person whose authority communicated itself through stillness rather than volume, a quality that had taken her a long time to develop and that she had learned to use with precision. She listened to Victoria finish her explanation. Then she said, "Let me make sure I have this right. You want to replace our featured performer because she's blind and black, and that made you and Gerald uncomfortable." Victoria's composure flickered. "That's an unfair characterization of—" "Then correct it," Margaret said. A pause. "The concern," Victoria said carefully, "is about the audience's expectations and the performance's ability to—" "The audience," Gerald Stanton said, with the air of a man who has decided to stop allowing someone else to explain his position for him, "has given 30 years of consistent major donations to this foundation based on a consistently high-quality program. That's not prejudice. That's accountability." "You're right," Margaret said. "That's exactly what it is. So let me tell you about accountability." She looked at him directly. "The performer we booked submitted an audition through an anonymous national competition. No name, no photograph, no biographical information, no demographic details of any kind. 7 professional music judges scored 2,300 submissions on technical precision, interpretive depth, emotional expressiveness, and performance cohesion. Nia Brooks ranked first. Not first among the younger applicants, not first among the disabled applicants, first, overall, among 2,300 musicians." The corridor was quiet. Gerald Stanton looked at Victoria. Victoria looked at the floor. "And I want to be specific," Margaret continued, "about what anonymous means in this context. The judges did not know her name. They did not know she was black. They did not know she was blind. They did not know she grew up without money in Ohio and put herself through conservatory on a partial scholarship. They knew only what came through the speakers, and that, what came through the speakers, was the best thing they heard all year." Gerald Stanton said nothing for a long moment. Then he said, "Why wasn't I told this?" "Because it wasn't your decision," Margaret said simply. "It was the committee's, and the committee made it well." Another silence, different in texture from the ones before. "Gerald," Margaret said, and her voice shifted. Not warmer exactly, but more direct. The way you speak to someone when you want to reach past their defenses rather than argue with them. "You started giving to this foundation because you believe that talent shouldn't be rationed by circumstance. You told me that yourself at the first event I attended after taking this job. I wrote it down. I still have it. So I'm asking you, what is happening in this corridor right now?" He looked at her. He was a man used to asking the questions. Being asked a real one did something to his face that was difficult to categorize, but that looked briefly like discomfort of the honest kind. "Fine," he said. He picked up his glass and walked back toward the main hall. Victoria started to say something. Margaret looked at her, and whatever it was went unsaid. "She performs," Margaret said, "tonight, as booked, and you will make sure that every logistical support she needs is in place and that no member of the event staff or the guest list creates any further disruption. Is that clear?" "Yes," Victoria said. "Good." Margaret turned and walked back toward the dressing room. Behind her, Victoria stood alone in the service corridor for a moment, in the specific quiet of someone who has just been told, without a single rude word, exactly who they are. The dressing room was small. It smelled faintly of hairspray and old carpet, and beneath both, something sweet from the catering area 2 rooms over. There was a love seat, a wall mirror Nia couldn't use, a rack for clothing, and a small speaker playing the ambient sound feed from the main hall so that performers could track the event's progress. Nia sat on the love seat with the violin case open across her knees. She was not touching the strings. She was just resting her hands on the instrument, feeling the warmth of the wood, the subtle vibration that the body of a violin holds even when it hasn't been played. She thought about her mother. There was a specific memory that came to her before performances, the same one every time, and she had stopped trying to redirect it because she had learned it was not an intrusion. It was a resource. She was 12 years old in a car with no heat on the passenger side, driving home from a regional competition in January. She had placed third. The 2 students who placed above her were from a private academy. She had cried quietly the whole way home, trying not to let her mother hear, and failing because her mother always heard. Her mother had reached over without taking her eyes off the road and put her hand on Nia's knee. She didn't say it's okay because it wasn't, and Nia Brooks was not a woman who said things that weren't true to make the moment easier. What she said was, the music was real. Whatever they decided, the music was real. That belongs to you. Nobody can score that. Nia sat with that now in a dressing room in Washington, D.C., 40 minutes after being told, in every way except the words themselves, that she did not belong in the room beyond the door. The speaker on the shelf carried the muffled sound of the event progressing. She could track it by its rhythms, the rise and fall of conversation, the shift to a lower murmur as guests moved to their tables, the focused silence of someone at a microphone, the brief ripple of applause. She had perhaps 15 minutes. She picked up the bow and played 3 notes. Not from the piece, her own notes, a private ritual she had kept for years, a way of checking in with herself and with the instrument. They said, I am here. They said, the instrument is ready. The question was whether she was. A knock at the door. 5 minutes, Ms. Brooks. Margaret's voice. Thank you, Nia said. She stood. She settled the violin under her chin. She held the bow loosely and let the weight of the evening move through her. The corridor, the word handler, the sound of Gerald Stanton's voice saying you're blind as though she might have forgotten. And she placed it somewhere specific, somewhere it wouldn't interfere with the work. She thought about her mother's hand on her knee. She followed the stage manager's hand on her elbow down the corridor and toward the stage. She could feel the audience before she reached them. The warmth of a full room, the compressed, expectant air of 300 people waiting for something to happen to them. She stepped onto the stage. Under her feet, the carpet gave way to hardwood. She felt the monitor speaker at her left ankle. She was in the right place. She lifted her bow. She opened with 3 notes so soft that the first row wasn't sure they'd heard them. At the third table from the front, Gerald Stanton had just set down his dessert spoon. He looked up. The notes were barely there. Not tentative, not uncertain, but quiet in the way that something is quiet when it is choosing its moment. They said, without any words at all, here, pay attention. Something is beginning. Then the piece began. It was Samuel Barber's Andante, not a piece that announces itself. It doesn't open with drama or spectacle. It opens the way a door opens when someone is trying not to wake the house, with care, with intention, with the understanding that what's on the other side matters. The first melodic line moved through the room like water finding its level. It was unhurried. It followed the internal logic of the composition with a precision that felt less like execution and more like inevitability. Each phrase connecting to the next in a way that made you feel, even if you couldn't have articulated it, that there was nowhere else for the music to go except where it was going. Gerald Stanton's hand, which had been moving toward his glass, stopped. He left the glass where it was. At the table to his left, a woman had closed her eyes. This happens sometimes with music, when the music is doing what music is supposed to do. It makes the visible world briefly irrelevant. Victoria Langford was standing at the far edge of the room, near the entrance corridor, her tablet at her side. She was watching the stage. Her face was very still. The piece moved into its central section, a passage of sustained, shimmering tension in which the melody seemed to hover at the edge of resolution without ever quite arriving there. This was where a player either had what the piece required or didn't. Technical correctness was not enough here. What the piece required was harder. The ability to hold a feeling in the sound without forcing it, to let the music carry weight without announcing what it weighed. Nia held it. Margaret Chen was standing against the back wall of the hall. She had attended this gala every year for 11 years and heard the featured performer every one of those years. She was standing with her arms loose at her sides, her face the kind of open and undefended that people's faces become when something breaks through the layers they maintain in professional settings. Gerald Stanton was leaning forward. He had not done this consciously. His body had made the decision for him, the way bodies do when the mind is otherwise occupied. He was thinking, with the unexpected clarity that music sometimes delivers, about something he hadn't thought about in years. A Saturday morning when he was 7 years old, and his mother had put a record on in the kitchen and sung along to it, badly, happily, without any awareness of being watched. He hadn't thought about that moment in perhaps 30 years. He did not ask himself why he was thinking about it now. He just sat with it. The piece reached its center. Nia paused. Not a rest in the technical sense, but a suspension, the kind that pulls the listener into a shared held breath. And in that half second, the entire room existed with her in it. Then she played the final section. This was where Barber had concentrated everything. The melody returned, recognizable from the opening, but transformed now, carrying the accumulated weight of what had come before. It was not resolution. Barber rarely offered clean resolution. What it was instead was something more honest and therefore more valuable. The sound of someone who has carried something difficult and has not been destroyed by it, who has, in fact, made the carrying itself into something. At the front table, a woman who ran a literacy nonprofit had tears on her face that she made no move to wipe. A man who had built his fortune in pharmaceutical distribution and who had a reputation for treating charity events as tax-efficient social obligations, sat with his arms on the table in front of him, looking at the stage with the expression of someone undergoing a reckoning they had not scheduled. Nia played the final phrase. The bow drew the last note from the string, long, diminishing, honest, and then it was done. The note hung in the air for a moment in the way that light sometimes does after the source goes dark. Then the room exhaled. The applause started at the third table, where a woman stood up and spread outward in a wave that moved faster than Nia could track with her ears. Though she tried, because this was information she could understand, even if the sight of it was unavailable to her. Within 5 seconds, the entire room was standing. She could hear the difference between people rising and people seated, the shift in where the sound was coming from, the specific resonance of 300 voices clapping in a room built to carry exactly this kind of sound. She stood on the stage and let it reach her. She could not see Gerald Stanton pressing 2 fingers briefly to his mouth, the way people do when they're managing something unexpected in their chest. She could not see Victoria Langford at the back of the room, hands still, eyes very bright. She could not see Margaret Chen unfolding her arms and letting them fall to her sides, because you don't need to hold yourself together once the thing you were afraid might not happen has happened. What she could hear was everything. She placed her hand briefly on her chest. She lowered her bow. She walked off the stage the way she had walked on, steadily, without hesitation, counting steps. 14, door on the right. It was Margaret Chen who told her. She came to the dressing room 20 minutes after the performance, knocked once and came in to find Nia sitting on the love seat with the violin on her knees, running a cloth along the strings. The action was automatic, habitual, the kind of thing your hands know to do without being asked. I need to tell you something, Margaret said, about how you were selected. Nia stopped moving the cloth. Margaret sat in the chair across from her. She explained the process carefully. The national anonymous competition, the submission system stripped of any identifying information, the 7 judges who received only audio files and registration numbers. No names, no photographs, no biographical details, no information about disability, race, age, or institutional affiliation. They knew nothing about you, Margaret said, only what you played. Nia was quiet. You submitted as registration number 0047, Margaret continued. The judges gave each submission composite scores across 4 criteria. When the scores were averaged, yours were the highest in the competition. How many submissions? Nia asked. 2,312. Another silence. Not highest in a category, Nia said. It wasn't a question. She was making sure she had understood. Not highest in a category, Margaret confirmed. Highest overall, among everyone. Nia set the cloth down on the case lid. She was thinking about the corridor outside this room 2 hours earlier, about the pause before the word you, about the word handler, about Gerald Stanton's voice, the blunt weight of it. You're blind. About Victoria's careful language and what it was carefully covering. About the 43 minutes she had spent alone in this room, holding her instrument and making the choice she had been making since she was 9 years old. To answer doubt not with argument, but with work. Did Victoria know this? Nia asked. She knew it before she confronted you at the entrance, Margaret said. Gerald knew it from tonight. I told him in the corridor. Nia nodded slowly. I want you to know, Margaret said, that this isn't something I've decided to keep quiet. I've spoken to the board about making the anonymous selection process transparent and permanent. Not just a practice we use occasionally, but a formal policy. What happened to you tonight should not have happened. And the reason it happened is something this institution needs to reckon with directly. Nia looked in the direction of Margaret's voice. Her face was composed, but there was something behind the composure that was not entirely containable. Not anger, not relief, not the kind of vindication that comes from being proven right. It was something more complex, the particular feeling of having carried something alone for a long time and being told finally, by someone with the authority to do something about it, that the caring had been witnessed. Thank you, Nia said. Thank you, Margaret said, for not walking out. I thought about it, Nia said. Margaret looked at her. What stopped you? Nia thought for a moment. The music wasn't theirs to take, she said. If I walked out, they'd have taken it. Margaret was quiet. Then, that's exactly right, she stood. The judge's written comments on your submission, I'd like to share them with you, if you'll let me. Some of what they wrote, I think you should hear it. I'd like that, Nia said. Margaret left. Nia sat in the small room, the violin across her knees, the sound of the ongoing gala carrying faintly through the wall. Somewhere in the main hall, 300 people were being asked to open their wallets because someone had just opened their hearts. She thought about 7 judges in separate rooms, listening to a recording of a woman they couldn't see, playing music that had no name attached to it, just sound, and deciding independently that it was the best. She thought, they heard me. They actually heard me. She picked up the bow and played her 3 private notes, for no audience, because that was where they had always been played, and that was where they would always be real. The gala raised $15 million that night, $3 million more than the previous year's record. In the days that followed, the story moved the way stories do when they touch something people have been pretending isn't there. A journalist who had been in the room as someone's guest, not there for a story, not looking for one, had been standing near the cocktail area when the exchange with Gerald Stanton happened. She had taken notes quietly, without making herself known. The piece she filed ran the following Tuesday. It was precise. It was sourced. It named names. Margaret Chen issued a formal statement within 24 hours. It acknowledged the treatment Nia had received. It expressed not vague regret, but specific accountability. It announced that the anonymous selection process would be formalized as permanent policy and disclosed publicly. It also announced an increase in arts education grants with a dedicated allocation for programs serving students with disabilities. Framed not as a gesture toward Nia, but as a direct outcome of a board conversation that the story had accelerated. Gerald Stanton did not issue a public statement. What he did was quieter. He called Margaret Chen 3 days after the gala. He spoke for about 5 minutes, and he was not the version of himself he usually deployed. Not the careful, self-possessed man who had spent decades managing rooms the way he managed portfolios. He was something more unguarded than that, which was uncomfortable for him and visible even over the phone. I've been thinking about what you asked me, he said, in the corridor. She remembered. She had asked him what was happening in this corridor right now. I don't have a good answer, he said. I don't think there is one. He increased his donation by 40%. He asked that the increase not be publicly announced. Victoria Langford submitted her resignation the following Friday. Whether it was voluntary, suggested, or required was a matter that stayed inside the firm. She had been in this industry for 23 years. She was very good at the organizational parts of her job, the logistics, the vendor management, the hour-by-hour choreography of a complex event. She would probably land somewhere well. People like Victoria Langford usually did. What she had been less good at was the part of the job that nobody ever put in the job description, the part where you recognize who is standing in front of you. She sent a brief personal note to Nia through the Foundation's contact system, 2 paragraphs, no excuses, no explanations. It said that she had been wrong and that she was sorry and that she had been thinking about the word handler since the night she said it and that she did not like what the thinking had shown her about herself. Nia read it, had it read to her by her text-to-speech software, and she set it aside. She was not ready to answer it. She might not ever be. Both of those things were allowed. Margaret sent Nia the judge's written comments from her audition. They arrived as a document, read aloud by her screen reader in its flat, efficient voice, which created a strange contrast with what the words themselves contained. One judge had written, "This is the kind of playing that reminds you why the piece was written." Another, "Among the most emotionally honest performances I have heard in a decade of adjudicating at this level." A third, more simply, "First." Nia sat with these for a long time. She thought about 7 people in separate rooms, listening to a recording of a woman they couldn't see, and deciding independently that it was the best. She thought, "This is what it sounds like when nobody's looking." She thought, "This is who I am when nobody decides who I should be." She put the document away. She went to practice the Brahms sonata she had been meaning to learn for 2 years. 7 judges, 0 identifying information, 2,300 submissions. And Nia came first, not because anyone gave her a chance, but because nobody took it away.